Well, good evening. Welcome to another edition of After Dinner Pipe and Coffee. I am bearded Welshman John Williams, and I am happy that you're here. Wearing my Kempe hat, my southern friends. I will soon be getting the southern version. And tonight, I was in the mood for it's a nice sitting pipe. I bought this in 2018. J.M. Boswell. Beautiful pipe. Just a beautiful pipe. Archie. That works out on the front counter now. Trying to show you the stem. Went back and should I have the perfect pipe for you? Mr. Boswell is finishing it up right now. And he brought the pipe out to me. And I just loved it. I love a big bowl. It is a non-filtered pipe. I've often thought about getting it made into a 9 mil, but I just don't want to mess with the perfection. Someday I'm hoping that I can get one made from Simon. London is calling. Jay Mouton. Brian Dorn. I've been hearing about Morton pipes. So, I'd like to find out more about them. Listen, folks. Let me clear the air here with you first before we get started. In the virtual world of what we are here, you see a virtual side of people, and you do not see the real side of people, unless they so choose to give it to you. I try to make myself as real as possible. Sometimes I say things that are upsetting to people. These are things that I believe. These are things that I have experienced. These are things that I know about. Because I make a statement, it is not a blanket statement. As a whole, on the community. What you see with me is what you get. I am a servant more than I am anything else. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is just one part of my life. I try to share other parts. Sometimes it's appreciated, sometimes it's not. Coffee drinking. It's part of my life. Speaking of coffee, freshly percolated. Lancaster County Coffee's vintage blend. Black, of course. Wearing these gloves. It is a cold night in Pennsylvania. It says it's 28 degrees out. But with the wind chill, about 18, 19. So, February's here. It is here. So I want you all to know that. What I say at times is not intended to offend or hurt anybody. It is strictly my opinion, my channel. It is not a blanket statement over anybody. So anyhow. So let's get on with it. Now, this book I bought a while ago, maybe last year I think. It's Riverside Literature Series. It's really cool. Burroughs, John Burroughs, he talks about birds and bees, and then we have Warner's on a hunting of the deer and other essays. His first name is escaping me. And then we have Henry David Thoreau's The Secession of Forests and Trees and Wild Apples. And yesterday I read on some of the apples. And then we have a biographical sketch of Thoreau by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I'll read that another time, because it's fairly long. Now, last evening, I read on the wild apple, right? What was it called? I skipped one of the parts, and it was called the wild apple. So, I want to start from the beginning of Wild Apples by Henry David Thoreau. And I'd like to continue, if you will indulge me. Set up lighting. There we go. These old eyes have a hard time seeing sometimes. And sometimes I'll put the pipe down so I can read. It's a good sitter. I like that pipe. Take a sip of coffee. But before that, please check out the merchandise. I'll have them in the link below. Helps me out greatly. Those of you who have bought coffee mugs, thank you very much. Sean, I sent your package out in the mail. Paul, Robert, and Jonathan, I have sent you some things as well. Let's get on with it, okay? Wild apples. The history of the apple tree. Henry David Thoreau. It is remarkable how closely the history of the apple tree is connected with that of man. The geologist tells us that the order of the Raceaceae, hard words, which includes the apple, also the true grasses and the labiatae, or mints, were introduced only a short time previous to the appearance of man on the globe. Okay. Don't know if that's true. I believe what Genesis tells us. It appears that the apples made a part of the food of that unknown primitive people, whose traces have lately been found at the bottom of the Swiss lakes, supposed to be older than the foundation of Rome, so old that they had no metallic implements. An entire black and shriveled crab apple has been recovered from their stores. Tacitus says of the ancient Germans that they satisfied their hunger with wild apples, among other things. Niebuhr, a German historical critic of ancient life, observes that the words for a house, a field, a plow, plowing, vine, wine, oil, milk, sheep, apples, and others relating to agriculture and the gentler ways of life agree in Latin and Greek, while the Latin words for all objects pertaining to war or the chase are utterly alien from the Greek. Thus, the apple tree may be considered a symbol of peace no less than the olive. The apple was early so important and so generally distributed that its name traced to its root in many languages signifies fruit in general. There's a word here, and then I think it's Greek, and it's for melon, and I can't say it. Won't attempt it. In Greek means an apple, also the fruit of other trees, also a sheep and any cattle, and finally riches in general. Excuse me while I light my cup. Smoking some Skiff mixture, by the way. The apple tree has been celebrated by the Hebrews, Greeks, Romans, and Scandinavians. Some have thought that the first human pair were tempted by its fruit. Adam and Eve, he's talking about there. Goddesses are fabled to have contended for it. Dragons were set to watch it, and heroes were employed to pluck it. The tree is mentioned in at least 3 places in the Old Testament, and its fruit in 2 or 3 more. Solomon sings, "As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons." And again, "Stay with me, flagons, comfort me with apples." The noblest part of man's noblest feature is named from this fruit, the apple of the eye. Interesting. You know, we say the apple was the forbidden fruit. And if you enjoy apples the way I do, you can understand this. It is a delightful and it is a nourishing food. It has natural sugars in it. And the apple of my eye. Have you ever heard that? The apple tree is also mentioned by Homer and Herodotus. Ulysses saw in the glorious garden of Alienus. I'm butchering these words, but I'm really trying, folks, so forgive me. Pears and pomegranates and apple trees bearing beautiful fruit. And according to Homer, apples were among the fruits which Tantalus could not pluck. The wind ever blowing their boughs away from him. Theophrastus knew and described the apple tree as a botanist. According to the Prose Edda, Iduna keeps in a box the apples which the gods, when they feel old, age approaching. Okay, so it has a thing down here in the bottom. Number 1, the Greek myths especially referred to are the choice of Paris and the apples of Hesperides. And then number 2, the stories of the early Scandinavians. That's the resources for this above. I feel old age approaching, having only to taste of to become young again. It is in this manner that they will be kept in renovated youth until Ragnarok, or the destruction of the gods. Ragnarok. I know that from the movie Thor of Marvel, the Marvel Comics. I learned from Loudon, an English authority on the culture of orchards and gardens, Loudon was, that the ancient Welsh bards were rewarded for excelling in song by the token of the apple spray, and in the Highlands of Scotland the apple tree is the badge of the clan Lamont. Interesting. Very interesting. Um, very, very, you see where the apple, it's not native to America. It's not just, I shouldn't say native, but it's not just to America. It's the world over. We go and we get many different types of apples. Crab apples are good. Granny Smiths, I love. There's some apples, Gala apples. I love Gala apples. So anyhow, the apple tree chiefly belongs to the temperate zone, northern temperate zone. Loudon says that it grows spontaneously in every part of Europe except the frigid zone and throughout Western Asia, China, and Japan. We have also 2 or 3 varieties of the apple indigenous in North America. The cultivated apple tree was first introduced into this country by the earliest settlers and is thought to do as well or better here than anywhere else. And think about that in America here, where we live, probably about 35, maybe 40 miles away. In Adams County, down towards Gettysburg, every October we have what's called Apple Fest. There are apple orchards everywhere down there. And there's a place that we go to called Hollabaugh Brothers that has, I'd never heard of apples, some of these apples, and they're just all so good. So good. Indigenous to these 2 or 3 varieties of the apple, indigenous to North America. The cultivated apple tree was first introduced in this country by the earliest settlers and is thought to do as well or better than anywhere else. Probably some of the varieties which are now cultivated were first introduced into Britain by the Romans. Pliny, adopting the distinction of Theophrastus, says of trees there are some which are altogether wild, some more civilized. Theophrastus includes the apple among the last, and indeed it is in this sense the most civilized of all trees. Think of all the things we use for the apples for. Applesauce, apple butter. I love making homemade apple butter. We eat it with peanut butter. We use it for a lot of foods. It is as harmless as a dove, as beautiful as a rose, and as valuable as flocks and herds. It has been longer cultivated than any other, and so is more humanized, and who knows but like the dog, it will at length be no longer traceable to its wild original. It migrates with man like the dog and horse and cow, first perchance from Greece to Italy, thence to England, thence to America. I like these words, thence. And to our western emigrant is still marching steadily toward the setting sun with the seeds of the apple in his pocket, or perhaps a few young trees strapped to his load. At least 1 million apple trees are thus set farther westward this year than any cultivated ones grew last year. Consider how the blossom week, like the Sabbath, is thus annually spreading over the prairies, for when man migrates he carries with him not only his birds, quadrupeds, insects, vegetables, and his very sward, but his orchard also. I'll pause there real quick to relight my pipe. Sorry about that, folks. Most of us know the story of Johnny Appleseed. That we learned in school. Now he went around and planted apple trees. Let me continue. The leaves and tender twigs are an agreeable food to many domestic animals, as the cow, horse, sheep, and goat, and the fruit is sought after by the first as well as by the hog. Thus, there appears to have existed a natural alliance between these animals and this tree from the first. The fruit of the crab in the forests of France is said to be a great resource for the wild boar. The crab apples. Crab apples, I mean, we got them everywhere around here. Not only Indian, but many indigenous insects, birds, quadrupeds welcome the apple tree to these shores. The tent caterpillar settled her eggs on the very first twig that was formed, and it has since shared her affections with the wild cherry. And the cankerworm also, in a measure, abandoned the elm to feed on it. Those are the worms that... You ever see those cartoons of the worm coming out of the apple? You know? As it grew apace, the bluebird, robin, cherry bird, kingbird, and many more came with haste and built their nests and warbled in its boughs, and so became orchard birds and multiplied more than ever. That was an era in the history of their race. The downy woodpecker found such a savory morsel under its bark that he perforated it in a ring quite round the tree before he left it, a thing which he had never done before, to my knowledge. Let me give you some background on this book, okay? This book, so the time period is what we're doing. I should have done this before. The first edition was 1879. It's been copyrighted many times. And the edition that I happen to have is from 1923. Just think about how old this book is and the time. Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson. So she's reading this. It did not take the partridge long to find out how sweet its buds were, and every eve she flew, and still flies, from the wood to pluck them, much to the farmer's sorrow. The rabbit, too, was not slow to learn the taste of its twigs and bark, and when the fruit was ripe, the squirrel half rolled, half carried it to his hole, and even the musquash crept up the bank from the brook at evening and greedily devoured it until he had worn a path in the grass there. And when it was frozen and thawed, the crow and the jay were glad to taste it occasionally. The owl crept into the first apple tree that became hollow, and fairly hooted with delight, finding it just the place for him. So settling down into it, he has remained there ever since. My theme being the wild apple, I will merely glance at some of the seasons in the annual growth of the cultivated apple, and pass on to my special province. The flowers of the apple are perhaps the most beautiful of any tree. So true. So true. Even over the cherry blossoms. I like them. So copious and so delicious to both sight and scent. And if you've ever walked through an apple orchard, the smell is just marvelous. That's my commentary. The walker is frequently tempted to turn and linger near some more than usually handsome one, whose blossoms are 2/3 expanded. How superior it is in these respects to the pear, whose blossoms are neither colored nor fragrant. By the middle of July, green apples were so large as to remind us of codling and of the autumn, which is the best time of year to pick the apples. This is the apple harvest. The sward is commonly strewed with little ones which fall, stillborn as it were, nature thus thinning them for us. The Roman writer Palladius said, "If apples are inclined to fall before their time, a stone placed in a split root will retain them." Some such notion, still surviving, may account for some of the stones which we see placed to be overgrown in the forks of the trees. They have a saying in Suffolk, England: at Michaelmas time, or a little before, half an apple goes to the core. Wonder what Michaelmas time is. If any of my English friends would know, that would be great. Comment. Early apples begin to be ripe about the 1st of August, but I think that none of them are so good to eat as some to smell. One is worth more to scent your handkerchief with than any perfume which they sell in the shops. The fragrance of some fruits is not to be forgotten, along with that of flowers. Some gnarly apples which I pick up in the road reminds me by its fragrance of all the wealth of Pomona. Pomona is the Roman goddess of fruit and of fruit trees, carrying me forward to those days when they will be collected in golden and ruddy heaps in the orchards and about the cider mills. Oh, I love apple cider. Oh, do I love apple cider. Cold, and then when you pour the apple cider into a crock pot and you slowly let it heat, there is a completely different taste to it. It is much sweeter and so refreshing. A week or two later, as you are going by orchards or gardens, especially in the evenings, you pass through a little region possessed by the fragrance of ripe apples, and thus enjoy them without price and without robbing anybody. There is thus about all natural products a certain volatile and ethereal quality which represents their highest value, and which cannot be vulgarized or bought and sold. No mortal has ever enjoyed the perfect flavor of any fruit, and only the godlike among men begin to taste its ambrosial qualities. For nectar and ambrosia are only those fine flavors of every earthly fruit which our coarse palates fail to perceive, just as we occupy the heaven of the gods without knowing it. When I see a particularly mean man carrying a load of fair and fragrant early apples to market, I seem to see a contest going on between him and his horse on the one side and the apples on the other. And to my mind, the apples always gain it. Pliny says that the apples are the heaviest of all things, and that the oxen begin to sweat at the mere sight of the load of them. Our driver begins to lose his load the moment he tries to transport them where they do not belong, that is, to any but the most beautiful. Though he gets out from time to time and feels of them and thinks they are all there, I see the stream of their evanescence and celestial qualities going to heaven from his cart, while the pulp and skin and core only are going to market. They are not apples but pomace. Are not these still Iduna's apples, who taste of which, though taste of which keeps the gods forever young? And think you that they will let Loki or Jassy carry them off to Jotunheim, Scandinavian mythology, for the home of Jotun or giants? Loki was a descendant of gods and a companion of the giants. Okay, so no for Ragnarok, or the destruction of the gods is not yet. I think we'll stop there. I think that would be a good place to stop. So, I hope you enjoyed today's reading of the history of the apple tree. I will mark this, and we will continue on another day. But for now, my friends, I will finish my pipe. I will finish my coffee. And I will call it a night. It is Valentine's Day, and for some it is a time of celebration with their loved ones. My wife and I, We don't recognize Valentine's Day as anything special. We try to treat each other with love throughout the whole year. So join me again, maybe tomorrow, maybe another day. We will continue with this book. I hope you're enjoying it. I know I am. Some of the words of the names of the Greek gods, Romans, and Scandinavians are hard to pronounce. But I hope that you enjoyed that reading. Until next time, I would like to say God bless. I'm going to look for my book marker. God bless you. May you stay safe. Take the time to enjoy this weekend. Don't rush through it. Read a good book. Find a good book to read. I have many books that I like to read, and I read little by little of each book. My favorite book, but of course, is the Bible. I enjoy many things. In the coming months, I'm going to give you a closer look at who John Williams really is. More than just a bearded Welshman. More than just a pipe smoker and a coffee drinker. And I hope that we can enjoy our time together. So, thank you for all the new subscribers. God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend.